That is a myth. So if you feel this pressure to be searching for your better half, I want to liberate you this evening and give you permission to say, that's a lie. The next time an individual comes up to you, and especially if it happens in church, I want you to stand up boldly, take a deep breath, point your finger in their face like an Old Testament prophet, and say, that's a lie. That's a myth. I know it's a myth because we already studied this together. You don't need to be looking for your better half. And I want to tell you a little bit why. I think this myth was instilled by a misinterpretation of a very popular verse. It's a verse that many of us were taught as we were looking at the creation story. And then we looked at Genesis 2:18 and saw the Lord God said, oh my goodness, this is important because it came from the being that is looking down on us with all power, who created everything we see, right? This must be important. It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a companion for him who corresponds to him. And many of us have interpreted this passage as God saying it is not good for humans to be single. A lot of us have interpreted that, and we've even been taught that what God is saying there is it's not good for humans to be single. That's actually not what this passage is saying. As a matter of fact, understanding this passage from that vantage point is actually going to lead you down a very disappointing path. Let me show you. Because if you start looking at singleness as being equal to incompleteness, you will prematurely get linked up to the wrong person. I want to say that again. If you look at singleness as being equal to incompleteness, you will prematurely get linked up with the wrong person. And let me tell you, there are so many marriages that actually failed from the very moment someone looked with goo eyes into the other person's face. From the very moment they shared their first kiss, from the very moment that they held hands together at the movie theater or while walking in the park. I don't know when it happened, but that moment where you feel the sparks fly. A lot of our relationships are doomed to fail because they're being based upon this faulty equation that being single is equal to being incomplete. And so that's how we get to this very popular phrase used in society, better half. Now, for those of you who are married, let me tell you, you've probably heard this on one occasion or another, where an individual sees you without your spouse. So then they inquire, where is your better half? Right? We've heard it many times, maybe even thousands of times. Our spouses referred to as better halves. But here's why that's so problematic. First of all, it actually gives you permission to bring less to the table than the person that you're looking for. Remember, they said better half, which means someone is bringing something to the table that's better than what you're bringing to the table. So in our minds, we may not notice it, but subconsciously, it starts to sink in for us that we are actually looking for a person that is better than we are, who can make up for the weaknesses we have. Because I'm looking for a better half. And let me tell you, this stuff gets very dangerous when you start thinking about the type of dynamic that sets up in a relationship. Because what that also suggests is that every relationship has the potential, especially if it is linked up and connected based upon this myth, that relationship has the potential of being one usury after another. Now that's a old school, old English, probably Middle English word, usury. What do I mean by that? Do you know that most relationships in our present society are forged out of fear? I fear that I am not going to measure up in life. I fear that I'm not going to be able to achieve in life. I fear that there is something wrong with me. And based on the premise, that presupposition of I fear, therefore I need you, sets up the relationship dynamic to be, well, I'm using you and you're using me. And we're trying to build this happy family. And that is never going to work. That's why it's a myth. Because any relationship that is based upon you looking into the eyes of another person and saying, I love you because I want to use you. Like, that is not romantic. By the way, that is not the way to start off a first date. I just want to warn everyone out there. It is a bad thing to start off first date saying, I love you and I want to use you. Now, someone is going to step back and say, I don't want to be used. I want to have a partnership. I want some mutual support. I want some give and some take. But check this out. If you're looking for a better half, you're already setting the other person up to be used by you, because you're looking for them to make up the difference in your own life. And so now we have to move forward, and we really have to look at this equation. What we're really saying is the equation of love must be this: half plus half equals a whole. But this is not biblical. Can I prove it to you? Some of you are saying, well, that's catchy. I think that's clever, but I don't think you're going to find that in the Bible. No, I can prove it to you in the Bible that this is not true. And I want to show you that when it comes to relationships, our Father in heaven never expected for human interaction to be based upon addition and subtraction. Let me prove it to you. Genesis 1 and verse 28. Look at what this says. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and do what? Multiply. He does not say be fruitful and add. He does not say be fruitful and subtract. He says be fruitful and multiply. So when you look at this equation, half plus half equals a whole, that is a myth that many of us are functioning under. That if we are single, then we are only half, and we need someone else to help us find a whole. God says, no, I never asked you to get linked up with another human being based upon addition. I asked you to get linked up based on multiplication. So let's watch this same formula equation when you put multiplication to it. Half times half actually equals 1/4. So when we get into a relationship based on this understanding of finding our better half, what we actually end up with is less than we came to the table with. Two people that come into the relationship to use one another in order to make up the difference that we feel, the void that we feel, the deficits we feel, will actually end up destroying one another to the point where each of us will be less than what we brought to the table originally. What's a good example of this? To make this practical, let's look at the life of Samson. When he got into his half times half relationship, he was strong, he had hair, and he could see. What happens when that relationship breaks up? He is bald, he's weak, and he's blind. Half times half equals 1/4, or less than you had originally. Genesis 2:18 is not saying that it was not good that human beings were single. It's really saying it is not good for human beings to be alone. And that terminology alone there is not simply something that is eradicated once you tie the knot. Once you get this whole wedding thing together, get down to the altar. I do. Do you? I do. Hey, let's go back out the same doors we came into. People are throwing rice at us. It kind of stings at times, but hey, we're all having fun. I would have preferred bubbles, but they brought rice. It stings, but we're married. We're finally whole because we're finally together. And God's saying, no, I never meant for you to see marriage as a way to counteract the not good aspect of loneliness. That's not why I made marriage. Adam, for example, already had a divine connection. Now, I don't know if you picked that up when you studied the creation story before, but at that time, human beings were able to interact with God face to face. The Bible hints at the fact that God would visit our planet in person once a day in the evening. So why is it that Adam had God, and yet God says it's still not good? Have you ever thought of that? Because there are a lot of times where I was in Bible studies, or I even heard sermons growing up, to where someone would say, or maybe even songs where someone would sing, and they would say, if you have God, you have all that you need. And I read Genesis and I'm saying, no, that's not what God said. God said that Adam has me, but it's still not good. Adam can walk with me, but it's still not good. Adam can talk with me, but it's still not good. Adam and I are cool, but it's still not good. Adam needed a healthy social life. And God does not count healthy social life simply as having your daily devotion. He does not say, as long as you pray to me, as long as you study my word, as long as you and I are cool, your life is okay. No, God says that is not good. What I want you to have is healthy interpersonal interaction. I want you to have a social life. I want you to get around other positive people who are pushing in the same direction as you. I want you to experience the bliss of human connection. And marriage is not the only way to have a healthy human connection. So when we look at marriage as the only way we as a single people can find wholeness, we set ourselves up for a devastating consequence. Anytime we use another human to complete us, we will create an unhealthy power dynamic. Can I prove it to you from the same story? Anytime you step into a human interaction or relationship and you're only factoring your cost-benefit analysis, like you're trying to invest as little as possible but get the most in the return. That's kind of like an exchange of monetary resources. That's how we do the whole stock market thing. We try to figure out, how can I invest as little as possible but get the most bang for my buck in return? And sadly, many of our relationships have been diminished to transactions. And it leaves us feeling way more empty 6, 12, 18 months later than we felt when we were single and we thought that that was emptiness. No, there's a devastation that's way higher than the discomfort a single person might feel when they see other couples together. Let me show you. Genesis 3 and verse 16 says, and you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you. Notice that when these two individuals interact with one another from the basis of, I don't feel total and complete. I actually feel naked. Can you help me? Hey, I feel the same way. Maybe you can help me. What happens is they both get together, and now there's a fight that breaks out in the house. Why? Because I only saw you as valuable based upon how complete you can make me feel. And many of us have had to go through living in a home where that was the dynamic. You could feel it. It was a power struggle between two spouses, each of them angry because they thought this connection was going to make me feel whole. But it's not making me feel whole. It's actually making me feel less than I ever felt in my life. And that's what God says is going to happen anytime we interact from a better half motif. The two people are going to get together. You'll have one desiring to control the other while the other is trying to rule the other. And some of you have even felt that in your dating relationships. This power struggle, this power dynamic, trying to play the game, trying to get the upper hand, trying to see who can get the advantage. And that dynamic, I want to suggest, is birthed when two individuals come in looking for their better half. And so what I'm advocating for is for us to start pursuing being wholly single. Now, we've heard this before, but usually it's only in like abstinence conversations where individuals talk about being holy and single, Holy. But I think the secret to living a satisfied single life is to start looking at being WHOLLY and single. That you are whole and that you feel complete. And that you're already pursuing purpose. That you're not looking for another person to complete you. At best, you're open to a companion coming to walk beside you. And as we move on throughout this week, we'll talk about how marriage, if you decide to do it, because marriage is not for everyone. We'll be discussing that on tomorrow night. But if you do decide to get married, then you're simply looking at a person that has received the same mission as you've received. And you're going to combine your superpowers so that you all can pursue that mission together at a level of excellence that you might not be able to pursue it by yourself. But what I want you to know is being wholly single has to be the goal before you even consider marriage. A person must feel whole and complete within themselves. That goal must be achieved before marriage becomes an option. And I think if more individuals focused on being wholly single, I think that they would be better prepared to come into a partnership and a companionship with someone for the rest of their life. And so I want to give you this other equation. To close out our talk tonight, we talked about multiplication versus addition, subtraction. Try this on for size. 1 times 1 equals 1. That God is actually wanting anyone who decides to be married to first achieve feeling like I'm a whole. And then he wants to introduce you to another person who also has gotten to the place where they've done their battling, they've done their struggling, they've done all of the soul searching, they've been fighting those insecurities, and they, through a community of support and healthy social interactions that they had while they were single, have finally gotten to the place where they are one. That 1 times the 1 is going to equal a beautiful new 1. And that's what marriage is supposed to be. But you don't have to get married to be a 1. You could be a 1 all by yourself. Thank you very much.